And to think that we ended up taking refuge in the very country which was responsible for the loss of Palestine. What a tragic irony that was. And I often used to ask my father when I was a child growing up in London, I would say to him, why are we in this country when you have told me so many times that it was Britain which sold our country to the Zionists? What are we doing here? Why are we here? And I know that he was, like so many parents in his position, would have been embarrassed, ashamed. But how could he explain that at the time of the Nakba, in 1948, the first thing that was at the top of people's agendas was how to survive, how to help one's children survive. It meant you had to get work, and that work could be anywhere. So you didn't have a choice. You couldn't say, well, I don't like this job, or I don't want to live here, or I want to live. You didn't have the choice. You had to take what you could find. And in my father's case, he found a job in London. And the thought uppermost in his mind, I know, was our well-being, our survival, my mother, the three of us. That's what he was thinking about. It's it's a great tragedy that the only job that he found was in the very country which had been the author of our tragedy. And that's part also of the tragedy of the Nakba, isn't it? That it goes on reverberating over time and in many different places. You know, so yes, it's an irony. As I was growing up in England and receiving education, I started to understand the history of what had happened to us. And in particular, I began to understand something which made me extremely angry and makes me angry to this very day, which is that our country, was used by Europe, the Europeans who had persecuted Jews historically and who had produced Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, and who felt badly about the Jews they had persecuted, found that they could ease their consciences by exporting those Jews they had wronged to a third country, a country which had nothing to do with Nazism or Jewish persecution in Europe, had actually nothing to do with Europe, and that was Palestine. Now, I cannot forgive or forget that act of offloading Jews whom Europe, let's face it, did not want, but felt badly about. So they eased their consciences at our expense, and at the same time they got rid of Jews they didn't want, so that we became the dumping ground for an unwanted people coming from outside, from Europe, when in reality we had nothing to do with their persecution. We were not Europeans. We were innocent. I can't forgive that, and I can't forget it. And Europe and the people who did that must pay for that crime. Now, when I think about the Nakba in 1947-49, it's terribly sad to realize not only that it never ended, but it got so much worse. What I've seen with the genocide in Gaza, with the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank today, is worse, in my opinion, than the original Nakba. At least in the original Nakba, most of us survived. Most of us lived to fight. And that's how we created the Palestine Liberation Organization, because we were alive to do that. But when I look at the situation today, where the actual survival of Palestinians, them remaining alive, is threatened, that's much worse than anything I've been through so far. Of course, all this sorrow and anger and so on will not actually help the situation. We need to think of what can be done. What can be done about this? Now, the moment I ask that question, I get an immediate sense of helplessness, because the foes of the Palestinians, the enemies of the Palestinians, are so powerful. They're so strong. It's very difficult to see how a small people, like the Palestinian people, who have retained their resistance through decades since the original expulsion, and who have put up a very brave opposition and refusal to be extinguished, that these same people should be called on now to fight, on the one hand, Israel stroke US, because you cannot think of Israel without the United States. So these two form a formidable enemy. But the other part of that is the West, the Western states, which support Israel, continue to support Israel, despite the genocide. Now, when you put it like that, what on earth can we do? What can we do against annihilation, to stop our extinction, to stop our erasure? Well, what I always think of is that we have to unite. We have to unite as Palestinians. Israel has been extremely successful in dividing us, in fragmenting us. I mean, take a Palestinian like me, living in exile in London. I'm a million miles away from a refugee in a UN-registered refugee camp near Palestine. What is it we have in common? And all the other communities that have been fragmented by Israel. We have to understand we are the same people. We have to get together. There is strength in numbers. We must not accept our fragmentation. We must work together, despite all the obstacles, despite the fact that Israel is there to fragment us and divide us and destroy any kind of unity. That's what we need to aim at, unity, because together we can fight, and we may be able to triumph one day. I've always believed that in terms of the long-term future, there is no other way than that we replace the Zionist apartheid state of Israel with a democratic Palestinian state. That will be the end and the trajectory of this long struggle and this long suffering. When we are able to return, all of us, to our homeland, and when we accept that there is a settler community in our homeland. They're calling themselves Jewish Israelis, but they are actually settlers and descendants of settlers. So in the democratic Palestine that I aspire to and I would like to see happen, there will be equality of citizenship between all the people who live there. That includes the settlers and their descendants. It's very difficult for me to say this as a Palestinian, to say that we will live together with the people who deprived us of our country, of so much, that I should say we need to learn to live with them. But I genuinely believe that is the only realistic, practical, and humane way to look at the future. When it will happen, I don't know, but I think we need to aspire to make it happen as soon as we can. Look, I think Israel cannot survive. It cannot be, quite apart from all the reasons why we would like to see that. And you have to be careful. You have to distinguish between wishful thinking and between what is actually likely to happen. I do not think that Israel can survive simply because, or the major reason is that it is a state that survives on war. It cannot survive if it's peaceful. It cannot. Its people don't know who the hell they are. They can only define themselves by war, by enemies. You know, these are enemies, we go and kill them. That's the only thing they have. If this were to stop for 5 minutes, they would then be thrown back onto their own questions of identity. What the hell are they doing in this part of the world? Is this a way to live? Everybody hates you around you. It's not sustainable. So I think that they've arrived at a point where they have discovered the only way they can go on is fighting. You know, getting the United States to support them. They fight. Look how many people they're fighting. They're killing. It's not an accident. They can't do it any other way because there is nothing there. There's no, you know, there's no authenticity. So, you know, it's like a warlike nation which just biffs you, kills you if you open your mouth, and that's not sustainable. So I think for those reasons alone, they will not survive. Even if Palestinians did nothing, and if everybody else did nothing, they won't survive. However, we can hasten that on, you know. I don't want to die with this thing still alive. That's really, I really mean it. I just tell you, I have a sister at 95 who said to me several times, I refuse to die while the state of Israel is there.